Powell Crosley certainly earned his place among the industrial giants of the 20th century. From mass production of radios, cars, home appliances, and smart bombs during World War II, to creating the most powerful radio broadcast station in the world, to ownership of the Cincinnati Reds, his place in American history is secure. If that's not enough, he was also at the forefront of aviation. He not only built airplanes, he was buying the latest and greatest. In the summer of 1930, he bought a brand new Lockheed Vega Flyer for $15,000. Now he could go from Cincinnati to Indianapolis comfortably in a fast 43 minutes. Enter female aviator pioneer Ruth Nichols, who also admired Crosley's new Lockheed cruiser. The native New Yorker had something else in mind too, to be the first female pilot to make a solo transatlantic flight. And Crosley's new plane would be just the ticket to make it happen. Knowing that her rivals, record-setting pilots Louise Thadden and Amelia Earhart, had the same aspirations, Nichols decided it was time to move. During a chance meeting with Crosley in Cincinnati in October of 1930, she pressed her case. In addition to securing her place in history, she also knew that there could be enormous financial rewards, book deals, endorsements, newspaper and magazine contracts, lecture tours, and even a motion picture contract. She needed big-time investors. For now, no one was listening, no one except Powell Crosley. After a good old-fashioned handshake deal, she climbed into Crosley's plane, lifted up into the sky, and steered for New York. It didn't take her long to find herself in a difficult situation. No sooner than she crossed the Pennsylvania line, she ran into a thick bank of fog. Unable to navigate below it, or unwilling to turn around or go through it for fear of plowing into a mountain, Nichols opted for a forced landing in an unfamiliar field. She was uninjured, but drove the propeller into the ground on her way to a grinding halt. What would Powell Crosley think of her now? It took 3 days for the repairs to be made, plenty of time for the press corps to dig in. In a stroke of irony, Nichols landed in the tiny settlement of Man's Choice, Pennsylvania, where male reporters, bent on getting their digs in, took their shots in the local papers. Meanwhile, hundreds of people from neighboring communities gathered around to catch a glimpse of Nichols and her bright red flying machine before she sailed off into the sky again. If Powell Crosley wasn't pleased that his new plane had been crash-landed, he also couldn't help but notice his name in stories across the country. Her photos after they hit the news wires were everywhere, and so was the Crosley-branded airplane. Undaunted, just 2 weeks later, Nichols set a transcontinental speed record, flying from Los Angeles to New York in 13 hours, 22 minutes, almost an hour and a half shorter than Charles Lindbergh's fastest transcontinental trip. Then, in March of 1931, she weathered temperatures of minus 40 degrees and 100-mile-per-hour winds that blew her out to sea off the New Jersey shore, flying nearly 6 miles into the sky, yet another female record. A month later, in Detroit, she claimed one more record, flying at a sustained 210 miles per hour. In the span of just 5 months, she had proven herself to be the fastest, bravest, and most daring female flyer in the world. And she did it all in Crosley's plane, and everyone knew it. Powell Crosley was thrilled. What a gal, what a plane, what a record. Congratulations, he wired in from Crosley headquarters. And in the spring of 1931, he finally agreed to let Nichols fly his plane in the test she cherished most, her solo flight across the Atlantic. Fearing other women would beat her to the punch, she sent out requests to her closest friends and family.
I want to keep this matter entirely confidential, so please, not a word of it. As a matter of fact, it might be well for you to destroy this letter.
Meanwhile, she had gained the support of prominent male flyers, most importantly, Clarence Chamberlain, the second man to ever fly over the Atlantic. Money began rolling in too, $5,000 from Paramount Pictures, $5,000 from Columbia Broadcasting, $3,000 from her brother, and another $1,000 from Crosley. Including a personal loan of $4,500, Nichols finally had enough cash to make the trip. But in order to pay off the loan, she needed to make money too. For this, she turned to East Coast businessman Hilton Rayleigh, the man who had discovered Amelia Earhart.
Early in May, I'm determined to attempt a flight from St. John's, Newfoundland to Europe, with Paris as my actual objective. My decision to make this flight is absolutely definite.
Rayleigh refused to take the job. Nichols was furious.
All right, don't help me. If I were a man, you'd help me. But because I'm a girl, you turn me down. I'll sell my car and everything I've got to make this flight possible. Whether you help me or not, I'm going to make this flight.
Rayleigh, admiring her persistence, finally agreed to take the job. It came with a price tag of $13,500. Fortunately, Rayleigh started coming through with his promises, securing a book deal, 2 magazine contracts, and an endorsement from a milk company. Amid the tools she was gathering, equipment, atlases, and foodstuffs, she was also packing for Paris, stashing away 4 hats, 4 dresses, 3 pairs of shoes, 2 different styles of bedroom slippers, and 1 very special item, evening in Paris perfume. Back home, the engine on the Crosley plane was completely overhauled and the passenger seats were removed. She also had the plane repainted, a bright white with gold wings. As a final touch, she renamed the airship Akita, a Dakota Indian word that meant to search, discover, or explore. Then she was slowed by the usual delays, test flights, plane weight problems, bad weather, and then on June 18th, landing gear failures, which pushed her back even more. Everything seemed to work against her. Even the U.S. Weather Bureau was opposed to her flight, in part because Nichols was a woman. It looks to us, one top meteorologist said, like personal or sex competition. Nichols' brother, a Navy pilot, was worried too. He asked her to take more time to prepare. It might mean your success, he told her, even though a slight delay. Even fellow female pilot Mildred Morgan begged Nichols not to fly across the ocean.
I guess the reason we don't want you to try is that we know there's no in-between. You will either make it or you won't. And what in the world is there anyway that's worth taking that chance for?
Morgan also knew there was no stopping Ruth Nichols.
Go to it if you feel that you must. But remember, if you do, and when you do, every girl flyer in the country will be praying for you every minute of the way. None of us will sleep a wink until we know that you're safe across. And the most famous woman in the world.
On the morning of June 22, 1931, Nichols awoke in her room at the Commodore Hotel. As soon as she got word that the Akita was ready, she reported to hangar number 6 at the airport in Brooklyn, arriving just after midday. After her mother handed her a bouquet of flowers picked from the family garden, Nichols climbed aboard in early afternoon. After testing the engine, she waited while a team of mechanics and bystanders pushed the plane to the runway. In her preparations for the flight, Nichols, rediscovering her Quaker roots, had scrawled Bible passages in a personal notebook.
Psalm 23, The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. John 14, If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. Psalm 121, The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night.
Finally, Ruth Nichols charged down the runway and lifted off into the sky. Pointing the Akita north, she was on her way. Navy helldivers accompanied her as far as Connecticut. By sundown, she found the tiny airfield in New Brunswick where she planned to stop for the night. It didn't look good. Instead of an expansive field wide and open, it was more like a small bowl. Believing she must be mistaken, that this couldn't be New Brunswick, she circled the airfield twice, checking her maps. But no, this was it. Despite years, months, and weeks to plan, she and her team of consultants had failed to properly investigate the very first stop on the journey. Now it was too late. With the sun in her eyes and photographers waiting on the ground and darkness coming soon, Nichols had to land. She came in fast, at 80 miles per hour, all the while half blinded by the sun. Unable to get a clear view of the runway below, Nichols missed her mark, touching down halfway down the short runway. Realizing that she wouldn't have enough time to stop the plane before it barreled into the rocks, Nichols tried to lift off again. She managed to get back in the air, but she was too low, and the plane's propeller skimmed the ground. Rocks shattered the undercarriage of the plane, then the engine broke apart. The cockpit splintered, and the Akita stopped dead in the brush, jerking Nichols' body forward with great force. In In pain, she climbed through the jagged wreckage and fell to the ground with a broken vertebrae in her back. Photographers descended upon her and began snapping pictures. As bad as it was, Nichols was fortunate to be alive. Once Clarence Chamberlain surveyed the crash site, he then understood that it would have been hard for any pilot to land a fast plane in that little field in the bowl. The sun that was directly in her eyes had made it even more difficult. Her transatlantic dream was over before it even started. Not only did her dream go up in smoke, gone were the book deals and magazine contracts. No lecture tours, no motion picture plans, and no more promises of big money. At this point, Nichols would be lucky just to pay off her loans. In the crash, she had lost everything. But she refused to quit, recovering in time to set the women's distance record with a flight from Oakland, California to Louisville, Kentucky, a distance of 1,977 miles. She also set more altitude records, becoming the first woman pilot of a commercial passenger airplane, flying for New York and New England Airways. Nichols, as a passenger on a private plane, was critically injured in Troy, New York, when the plane, a Curtiss Condor, crashed shortly after takeoff. When she returned to flying a year later, Nichols went to work for the Emergency Peace Campaign. In 1939, she headed Relief Wings, a civilian air service that performed emergency relief flights and assisted with the Civil Air Patrol during World War II, attaining the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the Civil Air Patrol. Following the war, Nichols became involved in other humanitarian efforts, using her celebrity to bring attention and raise funds for benevolent causes. She organized a mission of support for UNICEF, including piloting the Round of World Tour in 1949. In the 1950s, she served as Director of Women's Activities for Save the Children, Director of the Women's Division of the United Hospital Fund, and Field Director for the National Nephrosis Foundation. In 1958, after lobbying the United States Air Force for permission, she co-piloted a TF-102 Delta Dagger and reached 1,000 miles per hour at an altitude of 51,000 feet, setting new women's speed and altitude records at age 57. After such a fascinating life, her journey ended sadly. Suffering from severe depression, she died of a drug overdose at her home in New York City on September 25, 1960. She was 59. Her death was ruled a suicide.
Flying has nearly killed me many times. It has never made me rich. Yet, from the challenge of the skies, I have reaped humanity's most treasured reward. Life in its fullest meaning for myself and in relation to others. When I graduated from Miss Master School in 1919, my father rewarded me with a 10-minute ride in a World War I Jenny Flyer. I climbed into the plane in near panic, but once airborne, I felt an ecstasy that freed me of my fears. After that flight, there was no living without flying. I haven't come down to earth yet.
Every aviator and passenger today owe a good bit of gratitude to Ruth Nichols. Her courage and commitment blazed trails in the sky long before it was safe. On behalf of Crosley Brands, we salute this brave and bold pioneer of early aviation who made history in a Crosley. Fly on, Miss Nichols. Fearless.